Hello. We have been discussing about the early Greek philosopher Heraclitus, and we continue discussing his various theories. Today we will be discussing about the concept of logos in Heraclitus's philosophy. This is Dr. Ananya Barua, Associate Professor in the Department of Philosophy, Hindu College. Heraclitus of Ephesus has been a pre-Socratic Greek philosopher and is one of the earliest thinkers to propose a metaphysical principle called the logos. Though much of his work survives only in fragments, his concept of the logos remains one of the most influential and enigmatic contributions to Western philosophy. Now, the first question that should strike all of us here is, how did Heraclitus arrive at the concept of logos? Heraclitus observed the constant flux and change in the natural world. He famously said, "Panthare," or something which is everything flows, and also he had said, "You cannot step into the same river twice." Yet, despite the world's ceaseless change, he also noticed an underlying order, a pattern or principle that governed these changes. Philosophically, this led him to seek, first, not static being as Parmenides would, but a unifying principle in becoming. 2. A rational structure that held opposites together and accounted for change within a coherent system. And 3. He introduced the term logos, which in Greek means word, reason, account or principle, to refer to these underlying rationality. So, what is the logos for Heraclitus then? Heraclitus uses logos to describe a cosmic principle that governs the universe, an objective rationality or law that structures all phenomena, the logic behind nature's constant transformations. In fragment B1, Heraclitus writes, quote, "Although this logos is eternally valid, yet men are unable to understand it. All things come to pass in accordance with this logos." This suggests that the logos is universal and eternal. Human beings often ignore or misunderstand this deeper rational structure. It governs opposites, conflict and change, not by eliminating them, but by harmonizing them into a unity. Heraclitus also emphasizes that conflict is necessary for the world's order. The logos integrates opposites, life and death, war and peace, night and day, into a single rational process. Further, the question then is, how was logos a unique contribution from the end of Heraclitus? The idea of logos was radical in several ways. A. Unity in diversity. Unlike earlier Milesian philosophers, Thales and Anaximenes, who sought a material element like water or air as the arche, Heraclitus proposed a formal principle, logos, the structure or logic behind the elements and change itself. B. Foundation of irrational cosmology. Heraclitus's logos introduced the idea that the universe is intelligible, not random, not chaotic. This paved the way for a rational, lawful universe, a crucial foundation for later Greek science and metaphysics. Philosophical method is point number C, which is by emphasizing logos, Heraclitus subtly introduced the idea that understanding the world means understanding its language-like or reason-like structure. This shifted philosophy towards logical analysis, not just myth or observation. 4. Logos as the rational structure of reality. The logos is not just a passive description, it is the law of all becoming. It governs the transformation of things, the source of order in chaos. Even though reality seems contradictory, logos unites these contradictions in a deeper harmony. The principle of intelligibility. To know the logos is to know the world. For Heraclitus, humans must align their understanding with these logos. He criticized people for living as though they had private understandings while failing to grasp the universal logos that is common to all. Quoting a fragment here from fragment B89, quote, "The waking have one common world, but the sleeping turn aside each into a world of his own." This shows that the logos is not merely abstract law, but also a normative ideal. One ought to think in accordance with it. Number 5. Influence and legacy of the logos. Heraclitus' concept of the logos profoundly influenced Stoicism. The Stoics adapted the logos as the divine rational principle permeating the cosmos, often called the logos supermatikos or generative principle. They developed a pantheistic and deterministic worldview rooted in Heraclitean thought. Christian theology. The Gospel of John opens with, quote, "In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God," unquote. Here, the Logos becomes divine reason incarnate, the mediator between God and creation, identified, of course, with Christ. Though different in theological intention, this use reflects Heraclitus' idea of logos as eternal, rational, and world structuring. Now, the modern philosophy and science, we see that the idea that the universe follows rational laws key to scientific method owes much to the logos. Philosophers from Hegel to Heidegger reflected deeply on Heraclitus' use of logos as a principle of dialectic, becoming, and truth. Heraclitus' logos is a universal rational principle that structures reality and change amidst change. It unites opposites, explains flux, and establishes an orderly cosmos. It was unique because it replaced material explanations with a formal, rational one, emphasizing intelligibility over substance. It became foundational in Western metaphysics, bridging philosophy, science, and theology. Heraclitus uses the logos to describe a cosmic principle, a universal rational law that governs the entire universe. This principle is not material like water or air, but instead a formal or logical structure that ensures order, coherence, and meaning in the midst of constant change. Now, when we talk about some of the less directly influenced isms like the Neoplatonism of Plotinus, we see that Plotinus's concept of emanation mirrors Heraclitean's fire. The one overflows, generating the multiplicity of the cosmos through descending stages. Fire, as we understand, has been the arche for Heraclitus, and which in turn has been on because for the logos as unfolding, not chaos, but hierarchical motion, close to the Vedic notion of Agni as a divine unfolding. Yet, there is an order in change. Despite the constant change, Heraclitus observed that this change happens in an orderly and predictable way. That is, for example, the sun rises and sets, and there is an order to that, and that is bound by logos. Seasons follow a regular pattern. Life leads to death, which gives rise to life again. This observation led him to conclude that something must govern this flux, some underlying principle of order despite appearance of chaos. This governing principle is the Logos. The Logos is Heraclitus' name for this rational structure that governs all things. He says, although this Logos is always so, people fail to understand it, which means that the Logos is eternal and is always so. It governs everything. Most people fail to see it because they focus only on appearances. So for Heraclitus, the Logos is like the law behind the scenes, an invisible but ever-present intelligence or reason that regulates how things transform. The Logos harmonizes opposites, which means it is a key way that Logos functions as a cosmic principle. It is by reconciling opposites. Heraclitus believed that conflict was not chaos, but a necessary part of harmony. Vata or polymos is the father of all things. What unites from different tones comes the finest harmony, fragment B8, which means the Logos does not eliminate conflict. It embraces and uses it. Opposites like hot, cold, life, death, day, night are not contradictions, but complementary parts of a greater unity. Just as music depends on contrasting notes, the universe depends on the tension of opposites, and Logos is the principle that holds them together in balance. Thus, the Logos is impersonal yet universal. Unlike the gods of mythology, the Logos is impersonal. It is not a deity with a will or personality. It is rational. It operates with logical consistency. It is universal. It applies everywhere to everything. It is more like a natural law or cosmic reason than a mythological force. And yet, it has a divine character because it governs all existence. Now, if we see here about the aspect and explanation of Heraclitus' nature, we see that the explanation has been about the rational, impersonal, eternal principle vis-a-vis Logos. About the function of the Logos, the explanation is that the Logos governs change, reconciles opposites, creates harmony. The scope of the Logos is that it is universal. It underlies all of nature and reality, and its human relevance is that most people ignore it, but the wise align themselves with it. So we see that Heraclitus invites us not just to observe the Logos, but to live in accordance with it, using reason and understanding to harmonize ourselves with the deeper truth of the cosmos. Heraclitus refers to the Logos as an objective rationality or law that structures all phenomena in several of his surviving fragments. These fragments make it clear that Logos is universal and eternal, not subjective or personal. It is independent of human thought, though humans can align their thinking with it. It provides the rational structure behind the appearances of change and conflict. Now, some of the quotations picked up will further enable us to explain the process of Logos further. In fragment B1, the most foundational statement has been within quotes. Although this Logos is always so, people fail to understand it both before hearing it and when they have first heard it. For though all things come to be in accordance with this Logos, men are like the inexperienced when they experience such words and deeds as I expound, dividing each thing according to its nature and explaining how it is, unquote. So this interpretation, the logos is always so, means that the logos is eternal, objective, and not created by humans. All things come to be in accordance with these logos further implies that the logos is the rational law that structures everything that happens in the cosmos. Heraclitus criticizes ordinary people for not recognizing or understanding these logos, even though it governs all phenomena. Now there is yet another fragment which is again extremely important when it comes to logos, that is fragment B2. Quote, therefore it is necessary to follow what is common, but although the logos is common, most people live as if they had their own private understanding. The interpretation is that the logos is common, shared by all, impersonal and universal. Most people fail to live according to the universal logos, choosing instead subjective views. This shows Heraclitus believed logos to be an objective order, not relative or personal truth. Fragment B50 further says, quote, listening not to me but to the logos, it is wise to agree that all things are one, unquote, which means that truth and wisdom come not from Heraclitus himself, but from the logos. The logos reveals the unity of things, even amidst diversity. This again points to logos as an objective law that can be discovered, not invented. Fragment B41 further explains logos as, quote, the wise is one only, it is unwilling and willing to be called by the name of Zeus, unquote, which means that the wise here refers to the logos. It is so universal that even divine names like Zeus fall short of its true meaning. Heraclitus hints at the rational divine order that transcends myth, pointing to the logos as the real governing principle. Now, if we take a look at the PPT here and see the summary of the contextual references as displayed in the various fragments, we see that in fragment B1, logos is eternal and it governs all, most fail to grasp it. Fragment B2, logos is universal, but people follow subjective understandings. Logos B5, quote, is about how wisdom lies in listening to the logos, not personal opinion, and B41 is about logos is the only wise thing, possibly divine in nature. So we see that in these fragments, Heraclitus consistently describes logos as number one, objective, which is it exists independently of our thoughts. Number two, universal, that is it applies to all people, all times, all things. Number three, rational, that is it is based on a logic that can be discovered through reflection and insight. Now, if we further see some quotations of logos, we understand that yet the other quality of logos is of it being normative is that it is just not how things are, but how we ought to think if we want to understand reality. Heraclitus refers to the logos as an objective rationality or law that structures all phenomena in several of all his surviving fragments. These fragments make it clear that the logos is universal and eternal, not subjective or personal. It is independent of human thought, though humans can align their thinking with it. It provides the rational structure behind the appearance of change and conflict. Now, there's yet the other quotation which is again important when we talk about logos, and some of the quotations remind us that logos is almost taken equivalent to divinity like, though Heraclitus was clear that we cannot really attach any divine meanings to it. Now, if we have to summarize about the logos, we can say at best that number one, logos is the source of order in chaos, which means Heraclitus believed that what appears as a chaos, conflict, or opposition in the world is actually necessary and governed by an underlying law, the logos. Reality is full of contradictions, life and death, war and peace, walking and sleeping. These are not random or destructive forces, they are a part of a greater rational order. The logos governs these interplay of opposites, it orchestrates conflict into harmony. Fragment B8 quotes, "What opposes unites, from differences comes the most beautiful harmony," unquote. This is like how musical harmony arises from tension between notes. In the same way, the universe maintains its coherence through opposing forces. Without conflict, there would be no movement, no balance, no creation. Thus, logos is the principle that transforms what looks like chaos into an intelligible and balanced system. It is the invisible architecture that orders the visible disorder. Further, logos as the principle of intelligibility, in fragment B1, it is said, quote, "All things come to be in accordance with these logos," which means Heraclitus insists that everything happens in line with the logos and that if we want to understand the world, we must understand this rational principle. Fragment B2 states, quote, "It is necessary to follow what is common. The logos is common, but most people live as though the logos had the private understanding. This suggests that the logos is intelligible, it can be known and followed. But people are often blind to it because they live according to personal opinion, not universal reason. So to know the logos, it is important that one grasps the inner logic of the world, understands why things change, how opposites relate, and how unity emerges from diversity, how one aligns one's thinking with the rational structure of nature. So for Heraclitus, the logos is not just a physical principle, it is a way of understanding, a framework for rational thought. The wise person listens to the logos and sees the hidden unity behind apparent contradictions." So the philosophical significance of the logos, thus we see that it is, as displayed in the PPT here, the concept of order in chaos, which is the logos integrates conflict and change into a harmonious cosmic process. What seems chaotic is actually ordered by a rational structure. Principle of intelligibility, which means that to understand the logos is to understand how the world works. Logos is the law of thought and the law of being. So, we see that Heraclitus's brilliance lies in seeing that the world is not governed by static being but by dynamic rationality, and logos is the name he gives to this dynamic order. So we have been discussing about Heraclitus's philosophy, and we see how logos is one of the most critical elements when we have to understand Heraclitus's philosophy. And whenever we discuss, we had been discussing about the arcade fire, we must understand and acknowledge that the arcade fire is in progress only because the concept of logos exists in its brilliantly supreme form. Thank you so much.